Welcome to Make Your Mark Live. My name is Mark Moyer, and I'm super excited to have Kevin Bolin on today because honestly, Kevin is not only one of the more articulate guys I know and just super smart, and I like to surround myself with people that are way smarter than myself. But on top of that, somebody who really knows the ins and outs of insurance, especially as they tie in with athletes. And that's a pretty important topic, especially now that so many athletes are at home and they've had so many events canceled, that sort of thing. And just a quick little intro for you, Kevin. We'll get into more specifics in a few minutes. But you were a starting goalie in college for 4 years. You played varsity there, and then made a very difficult decision when you graduated that you not to pursue continuing the sport afterwards, but then you jumped into insurance, and more specifically, you do a lot of work with a lot of athletes, entertainers, high net worth individuals, and so forth. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that went on. But say hello, Kevin, and tell us where you are right now.
Hey everyone. Kevin Bolin here, as Mark said. He was very kind in saying I was a starting goalie. That was very nice of you. But yeah, I was a former hockey player, played prep school junior and college hockey at the D3 level, very similar to D1 AA football, really competitive. A lot of my former teammates played some type of pro hockey. Never thought I would end up in insurance. But through networking and the alumni base and an actual former goaltender at Moyer College as well, was working in insurance. Him and my coach were good friends and said, hey, you got to give this kid Kevin Bolin a call. He's looking to play after school. Not quite sure that's going to happen for him, but you should give him a call. And we connected, and I graduated in June of 2011, and I started working 4 weeks later. It was a pretty tough job market at the time, and I was really fortunate enough to get a job, and it was something that was really interesting to talk about. I enjoyed doing, and I've progressed to I'd say maybe 2 different roles in the insurance world since then.
That's great. And what do you think is it's funny because and don't take this the wrong way, but when you hear people say, well, I'm in insurance, usually the reaction is, oh, all right, because it's one of those industries that I think doesn't get probably the attention and respect it should, because I think people sometimes think of the insurance salesman or the person that's all over you for, signing up for this or that and things that you don't necessarily need. And I think sometimes it gets a bad rap and sometimes it's justified. And it's the same way in a lot of industries, but, but what's interesting is that it can be I don't want to say a sexy industry, but it's something that, number one, people that work in it can do pretty well in it. I mean, significantly well. But number two is that if you're good at it, you can also provide people with a lot of peace of mind that they may not normally have. And so I think my first, significant question to ask you is, how much should I or other people really know about the coverage that they have? I mean, why is that important?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. It is extremely important, and I do think that stigma is prevalent. I don't think that's a wrong thing to say. A lot of that has to do, with the salesperson persona, the way it's depicted on television and commercials. But I think the average person should really take a deeper understanding in their insurance. Not every agent is, I don't want to say 100% capable or broker. Many insurance professionals have different lines of expertise that are extremely niche. So knowing the basics, like, what a deductible is, or what are my exclusions on my policy, or why is this coverage at X? Why can't I have Y? I think these are all really important questions that, whether you're a professional athlete, a major executive, or just, the average day normal person that's, getting insurance from their local mom and pop shop, you should be able to ask these questions and really kind of have, I don't want to say a major understanding, but it's always important to ask and figure out what you're really purchasing, right? There could be a mistake. There could be something that's overlooked. So instead of just kind of saying, hey, I'm going to pass this risk off on the insurance, which is what it's there for, the individual should really, take some time and read their policies, ask their agent question, ask them out for a cup of coffee, find out what their personal contacts expertise is. If it's in a niche area, or if it's, let's say they're selling you life insurance and they go, oh, I'm a P&C expert, you say, hey, who in your office is working on my life insurance then? It could be another relationship for the individual to build, but also shows the broad expertise of that individual agent, that they can farm out different topics and really provide the best service for their client.
That's great. And so, in your opinion, because I guess I never really thought of the idea of taking my, broker or my agent out for coffee, or like because you know what, I can tell you right now, and I won't say which company I use, State Farm, but they the guy that I've had who I don't even know how long I've been with this guy, 15 years, 20 years or something, but I've never met him. He probably works 10 blocks away from me,
Yeah.
but he's got a practice, and then he's got people that work for him. I've never really met them, but every once in a while I hear from them. But it's I don't have any sort of personal attachment to them at all, and I feel like I should. I mean, would you agree, or how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's all personal preference, right? And if your broker or agent isn't showing that attention or that interest in you, that might be a telltale sign, or it might not be. Do you necessarily want an insurance person calling you once a week or seeing what's going on? It depends on your relationship with them. If that's the relationship you want to have, then that may be good. If you want to get more involved, it works both ways. Pick up the phone, talk to your agent. But in my eyes, a good agent should be checking in on their customers, not bothering them, but just, hey, Mark, how you doing? Your renewal's coming up in a couple of weeks. Anything I can help you with? Is there anything else you want to look at? I'm here to help. Just that little bit goes a long way.
That's great. Perfectly stated. So when people hear the word insurance, I think sometimes their brain gets a little foggy. Mine certainly does. But there are different types. But let's start first with the personal. Like for me, myself, if you could list a few of the types of insurance that I should have, and maybe some of the ones that are sort of optional. But why don't you throw a couple out?
I mean, I would say the obvious three are auto, homeowners, and life insurance. Auto is becoming more, I'd say, of a commodity, where you kind of just have it. Homeowners is going that way as well. But that's something that's very important, that the details of your policy. You may buy something online or because you saw a commercial, and you're getting the bare state minimum of coverages. So you're like, great, I'm only paying $99 a month or whatever the cost is, but you get in an accident, you're not covered. So that goes back to our first point in asking the proper questions. Hey, what's my bodily injury limits? Where are they at? If they're the minimum and you're a high income net worth person, you're exposed to a potential lawsuit. And the same goes for collision and comprehensive. They may say, oh yeah, here's your policy. We saved you $100 on your car insurance, but you get an accident. There's no glass coverage. There's no collision. You're in a bad spot right there. And then, that agent may say, hey, well, we got you coverage. That kind of responsibility also lies on the individual, where you want to ask those questions. At the end of the day, a good agent's not going to do that to you, but I've seen it happen numerous times across the board. Homeowners insurance.
Let's quick question on the auto then. I mean, because that makes perfect sense. But what's interesting is I don't remember ever being asked sort of almost like thinking what it would be the most common scenario to happen. Let's say, for example, I got in an accident, and the most common thing might be that I got in a fender bender, or I hit a mailbox, or who knows what. Well, then what are the pros and cons of having certain types of coverage there versus if someone rear-ended me and the car got totaled, that sort of thing. But I feel like if the agent was able to go through some common scenarios that I might run into, or perhaps me as a New York City resident having a car in the city, well, what type of coverage should I have there, like the dings and the mirrors and this and that, versus someone who might be driving 75 miles a day, blah, blah, blah. So I think that to me, I think something that would be really important is almost like a conversation about specific use versus just the blanket, well, you make, $50,000, you should have this, make 100,000, you should have that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that would be a scenario, I get into an accident. Why is bodily injury mandated? Well, that's usually a mandatory coverage. Okay, well, what happens if, what's going to cover my medical bills, right? Bodily injury and property damage is for the other party, right? It doesn't necessarily cover you. So
Right.
you're going to need personal injury protection. Some states require it, some don't. And then those little dents and dings and the collision, the fender benders, those are optional coverages. So you get that, maybe commercialized product where you see the ad on TV and you go, oh, I want to buy that, saving you X amount a year. You may not have all those necessary coverages to cover the dents, the dings. It may be at a minor limit where you're driving in New York City. If you only have $30,000 of bodily injury minimum in some states, I'm not sure in New York, and that person's medical bills are quadruple that, you're in a really bad spot.
Interesting. So that's auto, and that's obviously just sort of a smaller percentage of. I mean, there's a lot of things we could have. So you mentioned a minute ago homeowners insurance, and I know there are a lot of people that rent, and then there are a lot of people that own their homes, and a lot of people that have significant value of property within their homes, and then
Yep.
there's others that just have the basic sort of the IKEA couch or whatever it is, et cetera. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So homeowners insurance is somewhat, I don't want to say similar to auto insurance, but it is somewhat getting more commoditized, where the standard form that most people probably have is an HO3. What that means, it has 16 classified perils, lightning, I believe lightning, hail. And then there's also certain exclusions, like most homeowner policies are not going to cover flood. That's a separate policy. And then the contents are a big issue. If you don't have your home properly appraised, and you fall under the co-insurance limit, you may not be able to collect the full claim, which is a serious issue. And a proper agent will walk you through each step necessary. Have your home properly appraised, have your contents looked at the proper way, where the average person really should know what's going on in their policy, and not just say, hey, I have homeowners insurance. It's been with the same agent for 5 years. They never call me. We just renew it. A lot of homes, as of late, certain areas of the country are appreciating at a rapid rate. So if you have coverage for $300,000 and your home is worth now $5, that's a drastic number where you're underinsured. So it's all going to kind of circle back to the same theme of a good broker or agent is going to properly walk you through the steps, and not necessarily just hand you a cookie cutter product. For some people that may work, but as we enter into the higher income brackets, athletes, entertainers, it really becomes a more specialized product, where extra limits may be needed, and that would be an umbrella policy.
Well, taking a step back though, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, in a homeowner's policy, you also would have things like if you've got, let's say, an art collection, or, I mean, the property within the house counts as part of homeowners, doesn't it?
Yeah, certain properties do. If you do have an art collection, that may be an inland marine or a specific policy to protect that collection. There's certain limits on what's protected. Jewelry has certain dollar limits.
Mm-hmm.
Each form states somewhat vary. So if you have a really nice watch collection, that may not be covered entirely under your homeowner's policy. You're going to need a specific floater, rider, or separate policy to cover those unique items in your home. The average person may not need that, but like I said, as we gradually increase and enter those the athlete market, the entertainer market, those unique automobiles, art pieces, jewelry collections need their own separate insurance. And if you don't have that, you could be exposed to some risk.
That's really great to know. So I don't think I necessarily need to insure my stuffed animal collection, but the some of the other if they're really valuable, right? But I do have, like, personally, I do collect a lot of things, and it's interesting because I will admit to being to having failed in one important thing, and that is that from what I understand anyway, my collection is significantly, it's got some value to it, and the problem is that I don't have necessarily photographs of every piece that I
Yeah.
can then, so tell me, especially if I've got that certain level of net worth, or I've got some significant valuable items, is that something that my agent would sort of come in and take pictures of, or I would have to do that, or what's the usual
Yeah, I'm sure
process?
there would be some type of appraisal. Yeah, I would definitely talk to him about that. That's probably something he doesn't know. Maybe he
Mm,
never asked that question, but
right.
you should give him a call and just be like, "Hey, I have this collection. It's worth X amount. What do you recommend?" He
Mm,
can definitely walk you through those steps, whether it's itemizing each item and its value one by one, the overall collection. It really depends on the type of collection. So that'd be something definitely to speak to your agent about for sure.
okay, good to know. So that's great. So we've got auto, we've got homeowners, now life insurance. And life is we could probably spend 4 or 5 of these episodes on
Yeah,
life
yeah.
insurance. But just give the quick, like, sort of the quick basics of that, if there is
Yeah.
quick basics.
So, I mean, you have pretty much two major, I guess, categories. You have term insurance, which is your basic, it's term. It's 10, 15, 30 years. There's certain different numbers what you want to buy. There's medical underwriting, and it's a death benefit. You pay your insurance, you pay your premium rather, and you get a tax-free benefit when you pass away. There's not too many bells and whistles you can really put on it. It's, hey, I passed away. Here's the death benefit. What's interesting about, or something that should be looked into with a term policy is if you're going to buy a term policy, look into a fully convertible policy. What that means is, as it's about to expire, you have the option to turn that into a more permanent policy with limited medical underwriting again at that time. So that benefits maybe the younger person, the younger athlete that maybe hasn't obtained their peak wealth earning years yet, where they can lock in some coverage. They're in good health if they're young. And then as they reach that 15, 20, 30-year mark, 25-year mark, they can possibly convert that into a more permanent policy. That permanent policy, you're going to have multiple options: universal life, whole life. A lot of these are cash value building policies. They can get very complex, where people sometimes use them as a bank, and that also depends on your current life situation. If you have a solid financial foundation, a clear investment goal and strategy, they may not be that necessary. It really depends what each person's end goal is. If it's to create cash value, kind of create somewhat of a tax shelter, kind of know you're going to get X% gains with a certain product, that may be your style. If you're
Right.
not interested in that and you just, hey, I have all my money saved. I was a frugal person. I was very careful with investing. I just want my family to be covered if I were to pass away, then maybe, some type of a term policy may be more beneficial.
Now, from what I remember, because looking back many years ago, I joked about a previous broker that I had who I was actually pretty friendly with. I knew him very well. But I always would say to him that he had an additional wing to his house built based on the premiums I paid the guy.
Yeah.
Because he was, I always joked with him about being such a whatever, trying to scam me with stuff. But I mean, I know that there are some types of policies, just as you mentioned, especially in the life world, that some people really don't need, and but they tend to be very. They result in some nice fees for the salesperson. So how can you drill down to? I mean, look, on one hand, Kevin, I know that my agent needs to earn a living, but on the other hand, I don't feel like I need to be the person, fulfilling all of that. Is there, how can I find out where the balancing point is of what I really need to cover my life versus, you know, feeding his children, sort of a thing?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So, you can ask what the how they're compensated, and then it really is kind of a personal preference as well. If you feel you're being pressured into a cash accumulating policy, and you're like, hey, I just want to have a death benefit, you may be able to steer that conversation with your agent and be like, hey, I don't necessarily want to accumulate cash value and dump my liquid assets or my salary, my income into an insurance policy. I already have X, Y, and Z investments set up over here. Please show me another policy that strictly protects me if I were to die. It really is about communication. And the agent should be asking you what exactly you're looking for and explaining these policies to you. So the average person may not know. So if you're really looking for that, like a 10 pay, for example, I want to pay all my insurance premium because I'm making a ton of money right now and I don't want to think about it in 10 years, that may be the right product for you. Get all your premiums out of the way in 10 years, it builds that cash value and you can kind of let it sit. So always have open communication, tell them what you're looking for, be like, this is my budget. This is the benefit I want. And they should be able, with all the options out there, to get creative and build a plan for you.
I think what would be super helpful, maybe, Kevin, we can talk about this later offline, and it's something that we can offer to the people that are tuning in.
Sure.
There's almost like a list of, for argument's sake, 8 questions, 10 questions, X amount of questions that they should be asking their broker and their representative. And now, is it common or uncommon to have multiple, let's say, brokers or people that are involved with your insurance?
Yeah, it really depends on where you are in your life, in your career, from an income standpoint. I would say the average person probably only needs their local insurance agent. Average, that depends on how you define that term. As we get into the athlete, the executive, the entertainer market, are those people actually handling their day-to-day finances or their insurance? Most likely not. They have a business manager, they have a sports agent, someone that handles that for them. It does not mean they're detached from the situation. All these questions they should ask, the knowledge they should have, still pertain to them, because at the end of the day, they may be at a higher risk for people kind of pushing a product on them or suggesting something that may not fit. But in that sense, I would still say it's very important to have one consistent broker, but it's also important that broker has a dedicated team behind them with expertise across multiple lines. For example, myself, my expertise is with athletes, entertainers in the excess disability market, contingency market, even a little bit of event cancellation. Now, would I meet a client and try to explain to them the detailed nuances of a complex life insurance plan? Most likely not. I'd bring a team member with me to dedicate the robustness of our group expertise and how working with us or working with me, quote unquote, is the proper choice. You're not farming out each policy with different renewal dates and I'm going to this guy for my excess disability and this person's handling my life insurance, but my home's over here. It does kind of create not a complete picture. And at the end of the day, from my standpoint, I would personally like to make any clients of mine life a lot easier by saying, hey, here's the year we're looking at ahead of you. January, you have your homeowners with your auto as well. Your contract expires or renews, or you're a free agent this summer or 2 summers from now. You should really look at excess disability in this month. Your umbrella insurance should be packaged with your home and auto in January. So the business manager, the sports agent, the person handling their finances, the financial advisor, really kind of has a clear plan, and they're not hunting and pecking and going all over creation to find an insurance policy. It should be at their fingertips. The service from one person should be right there for them.
That's great to know, because again, these are all sort of giant mysteries to the average person, and even if you're an athlete and you've got your agent, you've got a business manager, you've got these people, a team surrounding you, I think it's still important for you to know these things and just have general basic knowledge of this stuff. I'm not asking the athlete to get to know all the specific nuances, but I think it's so important for peace of mind to know these things. Now, I've got a quick question from a retired NHL hockey player who's asked a question here. He wants to know what your view is on interest rates, meaning term versus whole life, and annuities, life annuities as guaranteed income. Do you have any sort of, predisposition towards them, or no comment?
Yeah, well, I mean, certain like index universal life is going to go based off financial indexes. So there may be more volatility in that product. Other products are more fixed rate, like you're going to gain, let's say 6 to 8%, and that's generally what you less risky. So it really depends on the product you pick. And it's going to be something that you're going to have to dive down deep with your advisor. Really depends on your risk for appetite for risk.
Okay. And so that's really, as you're saying, sort of a personal decision. I guess, I mean, I've seen before there are people that can model this stuff out for you and say, look, your first year it's going to be this, but your 10th year, 15th year, you're going to be seeing this, whether it's a rate of return on a specific fixed rate, or if it's if you roll the dice tied in with the markets or whatever it is. So I hope that that answered your question. But keep sort of trucking along here. There are obviously different age groups that are involved with all this stuff. So, I think someone who may be an athlete who's 22, number one, obviously thinks they're invincible and they probably won't get injured and all this other stuff. That's only happens to the other person. Or they may not be retiring until they're 30 something when actually it may be 20 something. And there's all kinds of different factors, but do you feel that someone, even coming out of college, should they be, how important is insurance to them? And because look, I think most 20 something year olds don't even pay attention to it. They barely even know that they should have renter insurance.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think that's going to tie into the overarching theme is the awareness, the question asking, the people that athletes surround themselves with. But yeah, absolutely, they should have insurance, whether, it is renter's insurance, they're renting a home near the stadium, they need their valuables, they need coverage, they need their contents covered. Auto insurance, obviously that's a given. If you're a professional athlete with no auto insurance, someone's not handling your business correctly. When you buy a car, it's pretty much mandatory that you have it, purchase a car.
Right.
Life insurance for a young athlete at that age, given they probably don't have a family, they may look at it as, I don't need that. Could be a good time to maybe purchase a cash accumulating policy where they can, set some money aside through a life insurance policy. If they're not a savvy investor or don't have that team built up around them yet, or they can look into a term policy and say, hey, I'm 22 years old. I'm going to buy a 15-year term. I'll probably be retired at the time. I'll have a lot of money and I'll look into funding a permanent policy then. Disability insurance, protecting that future potential massive contract, should be something that's at the forefront of their mind as well, especially for NFL, NBA, and even top NHL and MLB players. There's significant money now in professional sports, and it seems to be increasing exponentially every year. So if you have that talent, that work ethic, the opportunity to play professional sports, you should 100% look into protecting your future income earnings. It's very vital.
That's thank you so much for that. That's fantastic to know. Now, I guess, my perspective also is that just having the basic understanding of what types of insurances we all need is so important. But in terms of an athlete and an entrepreneur, I mean, a lot of them are entrepreneurs and a lot of them have businesses that they start even while they're playing, and many of them start one when they leave. What are some of the, shifting gears a little bit, what are some of the important types of insurance to have if you're a business owner? And let's say let's say I decide to start Mark Moyer LLC, or I've got the Win Again Academy, and what kind of protections do I need to have?
Yeah, no, great question. So that's going to kind of, I don't want to say go back to the basics, but liability coverage, obviously, for any business is extremely important. You want to protect all your bases. If there is a brick and mortar type office building, storefront, home, you're going to need property insurance as well. And then entrepreneur, athlete, successful business person may not be adequately covered with the limits provided in those policies. It's extremely vital to have a liability policy or an umbrella policy that really raise the limits of liability and protect that highly compensated or high income earning professional.
But wait, what am I protecting against? What should I be worried
Well,
about?
if there's an injury, let's say you're an entrepreneur, a public figure, an executive, and you're hosting an event, and someone slips and falls at your event, and they know who you are, and they know your contract's public knowledge, and they go, well, I'm going to sue this person for $10 million. Your standard policy that you purchase the limits on liability are not going to approach $10 million, right? They're going to be capped. So at the end of the day, you don't want to have your insurance on the liability side exhausted because of a slip and fall, something that happens to a guest, and they use your public likeness against you.
Okay.
That's what the liability of protecting us. It's extremely important, and it's probably one of the most underutilized tools, I would say, next to disability insurance, that athletes, entertainers, business people really look at. It's extremely important.
Now, okay, so let's talk about disability for a minute. Whether I'm an athlete and I, do the possible career-ending injury, I suppose, or an entertainer and I lose my voice or something, or an executive and I suffer a stroke and I can't continue doing whatever I was doing. Obviously, those really stand out. But do you think that do people ever? I mean, I don't think people necessarily expect that that's ever going to happen to them. They always say that happens to somebody else. How do you, as an agent, really try to implore them to really give it consideration without scaring them into thinking that's going to happen to them?
That's a great question, and it is somewhat difficult, right? So all the coverages we spoke about, auto, home, life, I don't want to say somewhat are a given, but they're the ones that people have the most knowledge about. We're talking about, hey, become more knowledgeable. They're pretty standard, and most people have them. When you start talking about disability insurance, people assume they're covered through their employer, which is correct. The one issue with that is if you have a unique occupation, or if your income levels are approaching astronomical, you may be underinsured from a disability standpoint. And what I mean by that is most long-term disability, or IDI, individual disability insurance plans, usually that are offered through your employer, have caps, just like all the other products we spoke about.
Right.
So if you're a partner in a law firm and you're making $1 million a year, and you go, I have disability, I'm fully insured on my life, everything's fully funded. Well, how much disability do you have? Well, at work they give me $15K. So if you become disabled and can't work, you're making $1 million. Can you support your lifestyle on $15,000 a month? When you say it like that to them, their eyes kind of usually go, oh, I don't think I could do that. So what we then show them is what 65% of income replacement looks like with $1 million salary on a monthly basis. It's about $55,000.
Right.
So when the client sees that, and you kind of lay it out for them, just like the interest rates on the fixed products or the variable products, you do have the charts that lay it out. When you lay it out like that for them, their eyes kind of go, whoa. And it really is kind of like that third layer of coverage. And that would be for an entertainer, an executive, an entrepreneur, a unique occupation. A lot of real estate people kind of don't have a defined income, but they make a lot of money, and they're vastly underinsured. It really requires, especially a real estate person, they're out either showing homes, they're out on construction sites, they're developing projects. If they're incapacitated in any way and can't do that, their income is going to take a significant hit. Their lifestyle is going to take a significant hit, and life insurance, homeowners, auto, they're not going to cover that.
Now, with disability, is that something if you get additional? So in other words, I might say, yeah, Kevin, look, my company is only giving me $15K a month coverage. I want the extra $40K to get to the 55 amount, and I get it through somebody like you or whoever it is. Is that something that the policy extends as long as I'm working or until I die, or is it?
Great question.
Term?
Great question. So yeah, it's going to be term. So this is what we call high limit or excess disability. It's mostly offered through the Lloyd's of London market. And it's all going to be on a case-by-case basis. Occupation, age, health, income all come into play. So it's not exactly a A plus B or 1 plus 2 equals 3. It really is a case by case basis where, depending on your age, maybe a 1 year policy term. Depending on your health, it may be 2 to 3 years. But the usual maximum that we see is a 5 year policy term. There are some unique options that may venture out past that, but they're very limited, and you don't see them too often. So I guess to answer your question, it is a term, and they have to be renewed at the end of each term.
Oh, I see, renewed. Because then I'm just wondering, because obviously in my case, for example, I run a business that probably, I suppose if I became incapacitated, I wouldn't be able to do these wonderful webinar live events here. But and if it's something I plan on doing for the next 10 years, I want to keep, I guess, renewing that policy. It
Yeah.
says that if I become, okay, got it. So that's really interesting because look, obviously, this especially resonates with athletes. But there's also something that you and I talked about before that has really come to the forefront now, and that is really having to do with event cancellation. Because if I'm an athlete and let's say I'm a hockey player in the summer times, I run a hockey camp, or I'm a soccer, whatever the sport is, and either I run a camp or I run a clinic or I have a camp or something, whatever it is,
Yeah.
different things, you know, all of a sudden now that's gone, poof.
Yeah.
And I've got to now refund everybody their money. I've got to still pay the facilities, blah, 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 blah. How do people get that sort of coverage? And what umbrella does that fall? I mean, what's that fall under?
Yeah, great question. So that's gonna kind of fall under the excess disability that we spoke about. It's considered contingency, but it's access through the Lloyd's of London market and the contingency market. So you're going to find what's called a managing general underwriter here in the U.S., and that's the the broker or the gateway to the London market. So you would have to contact one of these organizations through an insurance professional like myself to access this product. It is a hot button item right now. It's very interesting. Wimbledon has been in the news, I'm sure, as you have seen. March Madness, a lot of these conferences and organizations canceling. Obviously, everything's been canceled. So it really is an interesting time for this product, and it will be really interesting to see where it goes and how it's utilized moving forward. Because a major global pandemic where everyone is affected, there's going to be a lot of insurance claims being paid out for this type of product for sure.
Well, my guess is it's kind of too late for a lot of people to sign up for that now. But, or is it?
Fortunately, yeah.
Okay. So, but I think obviously once this winds down, I think people will start, it'll be a big market to jump into. I think people will say, well, look, we've got to protect our asses against the next pandemic that rolls around, because I suppose that could happen at some point. Now, because of this whole virus thing and everything, I think some people, including myself, have been like, maybe I should take another look at that life insurance policy or that whatever it is policy or disability. But in your opinion, Kevin, and try not to skew it towards your business necessarily, but for let's say the average person out there, right now today, what is something that they should look at almost immediately?
In what sense? To protect themselves from the situation, or if this were happen again in the future? That's a great question.
Yes.
I think a lot of people are asking that question, and from an individual personal standpoint, it's always good to have always check in on your life insurance, make sure you have enough as possible. God forbid if something were to happen, you want to leave your family financially set. Other than that, I mean, there's not much to do from a business standpoint.
What's the for the life insurance side of things? Is there a typical sort of multiple or something where you say, look, in life insurance you should protect against whatever it is, 5 times your annual something or 10 times, or is there a
it's usually 5 to 10 times your income. I mean, most carriers aren't going to go over 10 times income. There's financial justification, and then it comes down to premium appetite. Are you going to want to pay for if you have a high income, are you going to want to pay that much? Is the carrier going to want to insure you for that much? So yeah, it's general rule of thumb is around 10 times income.
Is it? Okay, great. And in terms of the, if I'm running a business right now, and let's say it's not brick and mortar. Let's say it's I don't know, a virtual business of some sort, or it's in my case a coaching and consulting business. Is there anything I really need to do because of this whole pandemic stuff that I should be shifting resources, or not necessarily?
It really is kind of uncharted waters right now. I think everyone's kind of taking it day by day. I would say contact your broker, your agent, have them talk to the carriers. A lot of people are suggesting, put in claims on your property coverage, right? Even though this is not necessarily a direct peril to the property, meaning fire, something that destroys the building, that interrupts your business. It's somewhat being suggested to talk to your agent, broker about that, and possibly even put in a claim. We don't know how things are gonna shake out with the carriers, with the states, with the local and federal government. It's really changing on a day by day basis. It doesn't hurt to be in touch with your agent or broker and ask them what to do, what their carriers are suggesting. But other than that, there's not much.
Okay, well, but that's good to know. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think what hopefully this is triggering, this the virus and so forth, is the opportunity to take a much closer look at what we've got in
Yeah.
terms of coverage and where we should tweak it. And maybe that some areas that we do want to bolster it, kick it up a notch, and then others where we say, why did I ever sign that? I really don't need that, that sort of thing. But this all rings true, Kevin, to the idea that, you know, there's a lot of things that we think are sort of unsexy, whether it's our insurance, or, do we have proper legal coverage for certain things, or, financially, we've got annuities, or we've got this and that. They're just going on and on and on. But we should be paying attention to sort of this stuff. And hopefully now is a great time to do that. Now, going forward, I know you do a lot of work specifically with athletes, with entertainers, with high net worth individuals, with businesses that protect those people, and with agents and so forth. But what do you think, or what are you seeing over the last, let's say, 4 or 5, 6 weeks, has been the biggest, outreach from, people that are reaching out to you? What are they worried about? What are they looking for, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. They're worried about their coverage. I mean, whether it's on the P&C side, from let's say an institution or a league, they're kind of wondering how they're covered. And it's like I said, it's uncharted waters. No one's really ever faced this type of global pandemic. From the individual athlete side, entertainer side, executive side, the disability products, especially for an athlete, are really only triggered when there's a career-ending injury. So
Mhm.
that is anything accident or sickness. If this sickness were to lead to a career-ending injury, and there's numerous things that can happen. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. Then we would be talking about this type of coverage. On your standard executive or entertainer, if there's a 90-day waiting period, that waiting period would have to be met before collecting the benefit. I don't see the coronavirus affecting an individual for 90 consecutive days. It might. Obviously, it's a serious topic and subject, but that's where that the disability product would come into play. So I personally haven't seen much um, with that. Where it really is kind of having an effect, besides everywhere, are things that people may not think about. Getting medicals done for life insurance, going to
Right.
meet a doctor, quarantine. How is that going to happen? We need to get this application signed in person. How are we going to get that done? So a lot of carriers and
Right.
states are kind of, looking at regulations and modifications and what can be done to get around that. So it's a constantly moving landscape, and it's really, when this is all over, hopefully it's soon, to kind of step back and take a look and go, wow, what just happened? There was a lot of movement in a short amount of time. Where do we stand now?
That's great. So, it's interesting. One of the questions someone asked was, where do you see insurance sort of moving in the future and so forth? Because look, let me take a step back. In the
Yeah.
financial world, even, just 10, 15, 20 years ago, we, most people had a broker. most people did, or many people did. But now that shifted to, everything can be done online with TD, Schwab, and so forth. And so I know that in the insurance space, people can just as easily now click to find coverage or whatever it is versus speaking to somebody like you necessarily. So how do you feel that you, Kevin, can stand out and apart from, let's say, your competition or online, opportunities? I mean, where can you add value to the conversation? Why? And I'm not trying to make this the Kevin sales pitch, but someone like a Kevin. But
Yeah.
I mean, how can someone like you provide me with value that I can ordinarily get just by doing online research?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So things are moving. Like auto insurance is moving. Even life insurance, things like Policy Genius, they're moving right towards the click and buy. I'm still a firm believer, even as we're telling the individual to be educated, know what you're purchasing. These are complex legal documents with a lot of nuances and specific wording about what's covered. And if you're just pointing, clicking, and buying, you're going to be buying coverage that's not properly suited for you as an individual. I believe there will always be a place needed for an insurance broker, especially on unique, complex risks, large business, hospitality organizations, major sporting leagues, even your major business person. There's too many products and too many coverages, each that have pages and pages of policy legal document wording, to combine that or to minimize that or to put that in a point and click type product. I don't think it's going to be feasible for everybody. Are there portions of insurance that already are that way? Absolutely. Is that the wave of the future? I definitely think so. So what's the distinguishing feature is going to be having that robust team of experts across all policy lines. Because at the end of the day, even if things that are moving to point and click, you're still going to need somebody to speak to eventually, right? With something as complex as insurance, very legal driven, it's all based on wording. Someone's going to need to decipher that and explain it at some point.
Perfect. So look, we've spent about close to an hour together here, and you've given us already some really really a strong blueprint, a strong sort of a framework of what insurance is and what it should look like. Obviously, we could probably go on for several more hours, and especially if we need to dig much deeper into, let's say, the world of getting access to disability coverage, that sort of thing. But what I'd like to do is sort of wrap things up now, and by just suggesting, number one, that I'll provide all the sort of contact info and stuff for you, Kevin. But is there an easy way, just for argument's sake, right now, is there an easy way for people to reach out to you directly?
Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn, Kevin Bolin, Bolin. My email is kbolin@bwd.us. Those would probably be the two easiest ways. Shoot me a note on LinkedIn. I'm pretty accessible and, always looking to talk and meet new people. So.
Well, that's great. And because look, the reason I chose you as one of the people I wanted to have on this MYM live series is that you're passionate about the education side of things, and you're not just out there to sell. You want to make sure that people are fully understanding of what they're jumping into, and because it can be getting insurance can be very expensive. It's an investment, but it's an investment in sort of peace of mind. And I know that if I'm operating on a day-to-day basis doing my own thing, but if I know that everything's protected,
Yeah.
then I can rest easy, weight off my shoulders. So I really appreciate your time, Kevin. This is part of what makes doing these things so great is meeting guys like you and who really have that expertise, but more importantly are willing to educate and teach along the way. And this is just why I think people would want to, going forward, choose people like you, or yes, choose you to consider covering themselves, especially if you're an athlete, an entertainer, high net worth individual, even a medium net worth individual, or a low net worth individual. Anyway, just someone who's got net worth above zero. But look, bottom line is I appreciate your time. Thanks so much. And I look forward to doing the next one with you down the road where we'll really dig deep
Yeah.
into some of these issues.
Absolutely, Mark. I appreciate it, and I look forward to the next one. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime, brother. Thanks so much, Kevin. And stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
All right, we'll do.